I lost 70 pounds in a year, and during that time, I came up with a lot of different breakfasts that were quick and easy, that incorporated a lot of 0 point foods, and just helped me to stay on track with my weight loss journey. And today I'm sharing a bunch of those recipes. Some of them are a little bit similar, but I wanted to include a couple varieties to just give some ideas and inspiration of different meals that you can have for breakfast, or some of these I even have as a dinner or lunch sometimes, but they are mostly breakfast meals that I like. And like I said, they just help me to stay on track, stay full and satisfied, but also incorporate a good amount of protein, fiber, veggies, fruits, all of those things. So if you enjoyed this video or find it helpful, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I will be including the WeightWatchers points. Some of them include potatoes, which are now a 0 point item on WeightWatchers, and back when I had filmed these videos, they're a little bit older, but with updated voiceovers that I'm doing, it may say potatoes were points, but they are now 0 on WeightWatchers. So the plan does change every now and then, and at the moment, potatoes are 0 points. A lot of lean proteins, vegetables, and a lot of those things that I try to incorporate in these meals. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to share this egg scramble first because it's definitely one of the meals I have made the most for breakfast. It's super filling and honestly just really quick and easy to throw together. I always start by heating up the hash browns first. So in a pan, I just spray it with some nonstick olive oil spray and add a serving of shredded hash brown potatoes, which are 0 points on WeightWatchers now. I just continue to cook those, stirring them around while I prep everything I'm going to be adding. So today I wanted to add some fresh jalapeno peppers from the garden. I also chopped up some center cut bacon. And unless I'm feeling less hungry than normal, I usually do 3 eggs. Sometimes I'll do 2 eggs, but I just scramble them up in a bowl. And today I added some everything bagel seasoning to make them a little extra flavorful. Once they've cooked for about 10 minutes, I'd say, that's when I add in the bacon. I also added some chopped up spinach, which is 0 points. And then after a couple more minutes, that's when I add in the scrambled eggs. And I just mix them to completely combine them with the hash browns. They kind of stick to it. I usually like to add some type of cheese until it gets nice and melted. So today I'm adding some light mozzarella cheese from Trader Joe's, and I just mix that until it's combined. Also add a little salt and pepper, and then that's it. It says it's a point for the hash browns. They're actually not a point anymore, so 3 points for this entire bowl. Moving on to these banana pancakes. I have been making these from the start of the first week of my weight loss journey. They're just one of my favorite options. They're nice and low point, and whenever I make them, I make the servings in separate bowls, so I've got my portion and Adam's portion separated. I start by mashing up a banana in each individual bowl and adding an egg and some milk. Today I just used cashew milk, but you could also use fat-free or whatever milk you prefer. Then to each portion, I add 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of powdered peanut butter, a half teaspoon of baking powder, and some cinnamon, and I just mix that until it's nice and combined. And now that I have a griddle, I like to use that a lot when I'm making a batch of pancakes, but otherwise you can just heat up a pan on the stove with some nonstick spray. Whenever I make pancakes or French toast, I like to top them with some fresh fruit. I find that it adds some extra sweetness without having to add a bunch of syrup. Although if I want some syrup, I can add that or some whipped cream as well. But I chopped up some fresh strawberries for this, as well as some chicken sausages. I usually get 3 pancakes out of each serving of mix, so that's what I have here. This is 1 serving for 3 points, and I topped it with the 2 points of chicken sausages, a little bit of whipped cream, which I actually don't usually track, and then the strawberries for 0 points. And like I said, sometimes I do like to use a lower sugar syrup option, but most of the time with the fruit and whipped cream, it ends up being enough. Next up is another one of those breakfasts that I usually just make when I don't have a lot of time, but I have the ingredients on hand, and that is breakfast tacos. I like to use corn tortillas, which I'm just heating up in a pan. I spray it with a little nonstick olive oil spray and just let those cook for like 30 seconds on each side while I get the other things prepared. When I make these, I always like to do some scrambled eggs with some type of protein and vegetable. Today I'm using some sausage and some frozen veggies. I actually didn't have any veggie mix made in the fridge. And when that's the case, it's really nice to have some frozen peppers and onions. I just got these from Trader Joe's, so I mixed them in with the scrambled eggs and the sausage, and then I just start cooking them. Sometimes I'll add some cheese to this, or this cheesy seasoning from Trader Joe's, which doesn't add points but helps to add some extra cheesy flavor to them. And once the scrambled eggs are done cooking, I just divide them up equally onto each corn tortilla. I like to drizzle it with some type of hot sauce, or sometimes if I have salsa, that's also a really good topping for these breakfast tacos. Usually they're pretty loaded up, and even if I have extra, I'll just eat it on the side. But I made it work today with these 2 tortillas, and it came out to 4 points total, 3 for the tortillas and 1 for the chicken sausage that I used. I always share my yogurt dessert bowls, and when I make them for breakfast, I do them a little bit differently. I usually prefer to use fresh fruit instead of frozen. I find it's a little less sweet. Sometimes that's just what I prefer for breakfast. So I weigh out my serving of vanilla Greek yogurt using my food scale, and I also topped it with some protein Cheerios that I just weighed out as well. I add a good amount of fresh blueberries for 0 points, and that makes this yogurt bowl 5 total on WeightWatchers. It's 3 for the serving of cereal I used and 2 for the yogurt. This breakfast bowl is another one that I have made so often throughout my weight loss journey, and especially now that potatoes are 0, it's nice to take advantage of that. They're nice and filling. So I have a washed potato that I just chopped up and put in a bowl that I microwaved. I like to microwave them before I air fry them. It helps them to cook a little bit more through. So after I did that, I air fried them for about 10 minutes. I had also scrambled up 3 eggs while I was cooking those in the air fryer, and I had some leftover veggie mix that I added on top of the potatoes when they were done. And then I've got a roasted garlic chicken sausage from Trader Joe's that I just chopped up, which was 3 points. You can see the potatoes say 2, but they're actually 0 now. So this entire bowl is only 3 points on WeightWatchers. I also topped it with some Cholula hot sauce, and that's it. My protein coffee isn't something that I usually just have on its own for breakfast. I'll usually have something with it, but I did want to include it in this video, so I always just start with a glass of ice. I use about 4 to 6 ounces of cold brew concentrate. I've really been enjoying the Dunkin' brand, and then I use a Quest salted caramel protein shake, which adds 3 points and 30 grams of protein. This next breakfast skillet has so much flavor. It's kind of a variation of the other hash brown skillet I showed, but this one is tomato and basil with some mozzarella. So you really can make it the same way, just mixing up the ingredients you use. I start with the pan that I sprayed with nonstick spray, and I'm cooking up a serving of those shredded hash brown potatoes. And while those are cooking and I just frequently stir them, as you can see, I'm getting everything else ready. So I chopped up some fresh tomatoes, some fresh basil, some turkey sausage, and then some fresh mozzarella cheese. Once the hash browns have cooked for about 10 minutes, I add in the turkey sausage, tomato, and basil. And I did spray it with some extra nonstick spray. It was a little dry, so sometimes I'll do that, but not always. I scramble in 3 eggs to the skillet, and I just make sure they're mixed together with the hash brown potatoes. And then once the eggs are pretty much cooked, that's when I'll add in the mozzarella cheese. While it's cooking, I also add some garlic, salt, and pepper, and sometimes I'll add different seasonings, but this one was enough flavor with the basil today. So this comes out to 5 points total. It is 3 for the fresh mozzarella that I used and 2 for the turkey sausage. I crave pancakes and French toast a lot more often for breakfast than I do eggs, but I know that eggs are 0 points and they help me to get in some protein. It's also easy for me to incorporate vegetables with them. So a lot of the times when I'll make pancakes or something, I'll make a small serving of eggs on the side. So that's what I'm doing for this breakfast today. I've got some buttermilk protein pancake mix that I added water to with some cinnamon and a splash of vanilla. I've got a pan for the eggs heating up on the stove, which I just add some chopped mushroom and bell pepper to, and then I've got another pan that I actually decided to just make 1 giant pancake instead of 3 smaller ones. It's the exact same thing, and I feel like it just saves me time when I just do 1 big one like this. So I let that cook until it starts to bubble and it's ready to flip, but I'm also cooking up the veggies with the scrambled eggs at the same time. I wanted to keep the eggs 0 points, so I added some salt, pepper, and a little bit of cheesy seasoning to give it some extra flavor. Sometimes I'll heat them up in a skillet or just the microwave, but I have some chicken sausages that I'm going to put on top of the pancake that I just heated and chopped up. I also added some fresh blueberries to the pancake and some sriracha to the scrambled eggs. And then, like I mentioned before, whenever I use whipped cream, usually I use a light version and I just don't end up tracking it. It's one of those mental weeklies. So technically, all I'm tracking for this meal is 4 points for the pancake mix and 2 for the chicken sausage. Breakfast sandwiches are another go-to of mine because I usually have most of the ingredients on hand and it's something that keeps me full for a while. Whenever I make a breakfast sandwich, I usually just use 2 eggs because that's what I can fit, but if I'm extra hungry, I'll make 3 and just eat the extra on the side that don't fit on the sandwich. Today I scrambled the eggs with some veggie mix, which is just cooked pepper, onion, and zucchini, some mushrooms. I put it on some sourdough bread. Then I added a slice of reduced fat pepper jack cheese, 2 slices of center cut bacon for 2 points, and that is it. I did toast up the sourdough just a little bit, but 7 points total for this sandwich. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of avocado toast. I don't always crave it, but when I do, this is how I make it. Sometimes I'll do 2 slices. Today I was just feeling 1, but I scrambled up 3 eggs and just cooked them in a pan with some nonstick spray. Once they were pretty much cooked, then I add some Crocus ham. And you can actually have 1 slice of Crocus ham for 0 points on WeightWatchers, so I don't have to track it. But to the eggs, I add some salt and pepper, and then once they're cooked, I add the ham in. I actually prefer to use fresh avocado for this, but I had these avocado cups on hand, so I wanted to use them up, and I usually just do half per slice of toast. So I spread half a container on for 1 point, then I add the eggs and ham that I made. I have extra, so I just eat that on the side, but I topped it with some everything bagel seasoning and some Cholula, and that is it for 3 points. This next breakfast is one that I crave way more frequently. Ever since we had a bagel shop open up nearby, we get bagels from time to time, but I crave them a lot more than that, so I like to make this lightened up version at home. I also like to have bagels with a side of scrambled eggs, again to bulk up the meal for 0 points. With the eggs, I'm using 2 slices of Crocus ham and some sweet peppers. I start by cooking the sweet peppers for a little bit, and I actually went out to the garden and got some chives, which I'm going to use for the bagel. Then once the sweet peppers have cooked for a few minutes, I add some fresh spinach. Then to the veggies that I'm cooking, I just scramble in 3 eggs and continue to cook those until they're done, also with the Crocus ham. I had prepped some 2-ingredient dough bagels earlier in the week, so I actually have one of those just heating up in the air fryer. When I made them, I used some whole wheat flour, so they're actually 3 points per bagel. From the bagel shop, I love getting cream cheese. They have one that has chives in it, and it's just my favorite, so that's what I like to do, kind of a similar version at home, but using some Laughing Cow. And actually, this specific Laughing Cow that I'm using today was a limited edition. I don't know if they still have it, but it was everything bagel seasoned, so added some extra flavor to it. And then I'm just adding up the chopped green onion. I forgot to mention I did also add some light mozzarella to the eggs today, so that added a point, but this comes out to 6 total. It's 3 for the bagel, and then 1 for the Laughing Cow, 1 for the ham, and 1 for the cheese and the eggs. This next breakfast does take a little extra work, but it really is one of my favorites to have, and that is biscuits and gravy. But today I'm making biscuits out of 2-ingredient dough. With my hands, I just mix together 1 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour, a cup of non-fat plain Greek yogurt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. I use my food scale to weigh out equal portions of the dough for the biscuits, so I weigh out the entire portion of dough and then divide it by however many biscuits I want. Today I wanted them to be 2 points each, so I got 8 of them. I pop those in the oven at 400 degrees and then get started on the gravy, which I'm just using some turkey sausage here that I'm heating up in a pan. I like to use my meat masher to get nice small pieces of the sausage. Once the turkey sausage is cooked, I add some flour and just mix it together until the sausage is nice and coated. Then I add some fat-free milk to it until it starts to form a thicker gravy. I also like when my gravy has a lot of pepper in it, so I added a really good amount of black pepper as well as some salt. And then I did want some eggs on the side, so while I'm letting the gravy simmer, I start scrambling up some scrambled eggs. I ended up having 2 biscuits for this portion, which are 4 points for both of them. Then I top them with a good amount of the gravy that comes out to 6 points. I really wanted a lot today. This is a little bit higher point of a serving, but the eggs are 0. They help me to get some extra protein, and that is it for my biscuits and gravy. As much as I like the hash brown egg scrambles that I make, sometimes I just crave some crispy hash browns. So when I want that, I start by just heating up a pan with some nonstick spray and a serving of hash browns. I don't end up mixing anything into them, so I just continue to cook them, mixing them around until they get nice and crispy. But I still want this meal to be nice and filling, so once the hash browns are done, I add some heated up veggie mix. This today was just pepper and onion. Then I've got some chopped up chicken sausage. and 2 points of light cheese, 2 fried eggs for 0, making this 4 points. Next up, I'm making some pumpkin spice baked oats. So I always just make baked oats in the blender. I like to get them nice and blended up. It makes it more cake-like when I bake them. This makes 2 servings, but into the blender I add a half cup of pumpkin puree, a quarter cup of cashew milk, and 2 eggs. I add in a cup of oats, which are actually 0 points, a teaspoon of baking powder, 1 tablespoon of monk fruit sweetener, and then today I'm using some pumpkin spice skinny syrup. I did 2 tablespoons of it, as well as about a teaspoon of cinnamon and 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. Once everything's in the blender, I just blend it up on low speed. I make sure to scrape down the sides to get everything combined, and then once it is all blended together, I add it to 2 separate ramekins. I spray them with some nonstick cooking spray and then just divide them as equally as I can. Then I pop them in the oven that's preheating to 400 for about 25 to 30 minutes. This is technically 0 points on WeightWatchers. I used all 0 point ingredients, although some question whether or not blended oats are actually 0, but when you bake it this long, it comes out cake-like like this, which is how I prefer it. Sometimes Adam likes it a little underbaked, so it's liquidy in the middle, but that's it. This next breakfast is another super basic one, but I just wanted to share because sometimes I like to have English muffins on the side, and that's what I'm doing with some eggs today. I start by scrambling up some eggs, and I've got these sweet Italian chicken sausages that I'm chopping up. I know I mentioned that I like to add vegetables to my eggs anytime I make them, but sometimes I just don't really crave that, especially in the morning, so it's totally fine to just have the eggs with some sausage in them. I added some seasoning for extra flavor, and I just cook them up until they're done. I was also craving some cheesy eggs today, so I just added a point of reduced fat shredded Mexican cheese blend and combined it until it was melted. I have had an English muffin just heating up in the air fryer. It gets nice and toasty, and I sprayed it with some nonstick butter spray, so it gives it that flavor without adding some extra points, and this meal comes out to 7 total on WeightWatchers. I wanted to share another breakfast sandwich. Again, when I make these, I usually just do 2 eggs because that's what fits better, but I'm scrambling this up, and today I wanted some green pepper and onion, which I actually had some already chopped in the fridge. Sometimes I find it easier to just try to form the egg into kind of a patty, so I just let it cook at a low heat on the stove until it forms an egg patty, almost like an omelet like this, and then I add it to my toasted sourdough with 2 slices of center cut bacon. It comes out to 6 points total, 2 for the bacon and 4 for the 2 slices of sourdough, and it's a nice filling breakfast sandwich. Like I mentioned, I really crave French toast and pancakes a lot, and this is how I make French toast when I have it. I start with an egg and a splash of milk. Usually I'll use cashew milk or just some fat-free. Then to this I also add some vanilla, cinnamon, and I used some butter pecan skinny syrup to add a little extra sweetness today. I usually just use whatever bread I have on hand, and today it is this seed-tastic bread from Aldi. So I put the slices into the egg mix and really make sure to soak it in. I just do this by really pushing my fingers into the bread, and you can feel it absorbing it kind of like a sponge. Now that I have a griddle, it's much easier to just make batches on there, but right now I've just got a pan heating up on the stove that I sprayed with some nonstick spray, and I can start cooking the French toast. And while it is cooking, I'm just getting the fruit ready to top it, so I'm chopping up some strawberries, and I've got fresh blueberries today. Like I mentioned, I always like to have some type of eggs on the side to add some extra protein and make this more filling with some 0 point foods. So I just scramble up 2 eggs and I add some chopped onion that I already had ready, as well as some spinach. I just scramble the eggs like normal on the stove, and then once the French toast is done, I top it with some Flavor God buttery cinnamon roll seasoning. I really enjoy adding some type of sweet chicken sausage. Usually there are like apple options or maple options. These are Balinskis, and you can have 2 of them for 2 points. So I just cut them up and cooked them in a pan to add on top of the French toast. And I did actually add some sugar-free syrup to this today, but for the French toast, I just have to track the 2 slices of bread for 3 points, and then the 2 chicken sausages for 2. Everything in the eggs were 0, and same with the syrup. This next breakfast recipe is another go-to of mine because it's really quick and easy to throw together, and I usually always have the ingredients on hand for it. I actually had just prepped some bacon, so I just make the whole package in the oven at once. It's easy to just have it in a container ready in the fridge. But once the bacon was done, I started scrambling up some eggs that I just cook on the stove like normal. I added a little bit of garlic salt and some different garlic herb seasoning to the eggs while they were cooking, and then I did add some yellow bell pepper. You can barely see them mixed in, but there's some pepper in there. I usually prefer to just make one large burrito, but if I can't find the large tortillas like this, then I just use two smaller ones. But it's 2 points for this La Banderita low-carb tortilla. I add some light mozzarella, the cooked eggs, and the cooked bacon. And then I actually got some hash brown sticks, so I just heated one of those up in the air fryer and broke it up to crumble onto the burrito. I wrapped it tightly, and then I just heated it up using my griddler. I also made some hot coffee with just a splash of Chobani creamer, which I don't track, and that makes this breakfast a total of 6 points. It's 1 for the hash brown stick I added, 2 for 2 slices of bacon, 1 for the cheese, and 2 for the large La Banderita tortilla. I wanted to include another variation of the egg hash brown scrambles that I make just because they're so quick and easy, and this one is so filling for only 3 points. So I start with the serving of shredded hash brown potatoes with a little bit of onion, salt, and seasoning. I cook those for a few minutes, just stirring pretty consistently, and then I have some prepped veggie mix in the fridge, which is just pepper, onion, and zucchini, so I add a good amount of that into the hash browns. I had some center cut bacon that I prepped earlier in the week that was just in the fridge, so I break up 2 pieces of that into the hash browns and continue to cook those to heat it up. A lot of time when I add the eggs in, I'll spray some extra nonstick spray just to make sure they don't stick, but I spray it in the middle, crack 3 eggs in, and then mix those up to combine them with the hash browns. I usually like to wait until the egg is mostly cooked and then I add in the cheese. Today I'm just using a half serving of light mozzarella, which is 1 point on WeightWatchers. I cook that for a couple more minutes until the cheese is melted, and then that is it. This entire serving is 3 points. Like I said, it's super filling. Sometimes I'll add some hot sauce or ketchup or even salsa, but that's it. This next recipe I've made a couple different ways. Sometimes I will just use some protein buttermilk pancake mix. Today I wanted to use up some of this protein flour, but I'm making a microwave pancake. I mixed 1.5 scoops of the PE Science protein flour with some cinnamon, baking powder, and then a little bit of brown coconut sugar. I whisked in an egg, some vanilla, and a little fat-free milk until it made a nice batter, and then I'm just using this microwave-safe bowl that I sprayed with some nonstick spray. I poured the entire serving of batter into the bowl, and then I wanted to add some type of fruit, so I had fresh blueberries that I just placed in there. I think chocolate chips would also be really good, but they would add some points. I did want a sauce for this, so I mixed some PB2 with a little bit of sugar cookie flavored skinny syrup and some water. I had to keep going until I got it the consistency I wanted, but I didn't want to add too much water at once. So I just whisked it together until it was a little bit runny. I microwaved the pancake for a minute and checked on it, and then I did it in another 30-second interval and then one more. Once it was fully cooked in the center, then I pulled it out and I drizzled it with this powdered peanut butter topping that I made. It ended up being 5 points total. It was 3 for the protein flour I used. Then I did 1 point of the coconut brown sugar and 1 point of the powdered peanut butter. It was salted caramel nuts and more flavor. A go-to breakfast of mine really is some eggs with toast as a side, just because, again, it's so quick and easy, and that's what I'm making today. I'm scrambling up 2 eggs that I add some of this veggie mix to. You'll see a lot of these are kind of repetitive with the different vegetable options I use, but having the veggie mix on hand really is so convenient to make quick and easy breakfasts. It really goes with so much, and it's always so much faster when it's already cooked and ready to just incorporate into meals. So I mixed in some chicken sausage with the eggs and veggies, and then I just sprayed a pan with this ghee spray, which I actually don't buy this spray anymore. They changed their bottles and it just doesn't work. I wish they would fix it, and if they do, I will definitely buy it again. But anyway, that's what I used as the spray. I also added some jalapeno popper seasoning to these eggs. And while the eggs were cooking, I was toasting up some bread. So this is just Ezekiel. You can have 2 slices for 3 points. And actually, they don't make this date spread anymore. It was one of my favorites, but a lot of the time I'll just use some jelly or something like that. And I really like to top it with buttery cinnamon roll seasoning. But it helps to satisfy my sweet tooth. Usually I end with the toast because it's nice and sweet, but this comes out to 6 points. It's 3 for the bread, 1 for the date spread, and then the chicken sausages I used, they were 2 points for 2 of them. Next up, I'm making a large breakfast wrap, again using a large La Banderita low-carb tortilla. I scrambled up 2 eggs because that's what will fit on here, and then I'm also chopping up 3 slices of Canadian bacon, which are 1 point. I start scrambling up the eggs, and once they're pretty much done, then I add in the chopped Canadian bacon. I also have some pre-made veggie mix in the fridge, again just pepper, onion, and zucchini, so I add a good amount of that, and if there's ever liquid in it, I just tried my best to strain it out before adding it to the eggs. I add a good amount of this onion and herb seasoning. It adds such good flavor, as well as some of this universal salt, and then I just mix everything together with some pepper. My favorite part of this wrap is adding a Laughing Cow wedge, and this is the creamy garlic and herbs, so I just spread it onto one side before I add the other ingredients to the wrap. I add the egg mixture that's fully cooked, and then I just wrap it up nice and tight and pop it in the air fryer until it gets nice and golden brown. While it's cooking, I also make a different variation of my protein coffee. So I've got some espresso that I just made, and I mixed in chocolate collagen. Then I pour it into the ice with a Quest salted caramel protein shake, and it comes out to 3 points total. The wrap comes out to 4 points on WeightWatchers. It's 2 for the tortilla, 1 for the Laughing Cow, and 1 for the Canadian bacon that I used. And this is it once it's done. I like to usually cut it in half. This next recipe is a little bit of a copycat Taco Bell breakfast recipe. We are making some breakfast crunch wraps. I pop a Trader Joe's hash brown patty in the air fryer. They're 4 points for 1 on WeightWatchers. And then for each crunch wrap, I'm using a large Extreme Wellness tortilla. I'm making a crunch wrap for each of us today, so I make 4 eggs, but usually I do 2 eggs to each crunch wrap. I'm also adding this jalapeno seasoning to give it a little extra kick and some flavor today. I also just had some sauteed bell pepper and onion from a previous meal, so I mixed that in with the eggs and the seasoning as well. And then I just get the rest of the ingredients ready for the crunch wrap. So each one is going to get 1 point of reduced fat shredded Mexican cheese blend from Trader Joe's. I also have these turkey sausage patties, which usually I would just use 1. Today we were more hungry, so I did 2, which makes these a little higher point because for 2 of the patties, it's 4 points on WeightWatchers. And the sausage is actually just what I had on hand. When I make these, I usually prefer to do bacon, but to the crunch wrap in the center, I add the serving of cheese that I weighed out. I add the cooked scrambled eggs that have the veggies mixed in. Then I add the 2 sausage patties I chopped up, as well as the hash brown patty that is done cooking in the air fryer. To fold these, you just take the outside and put them into the center, as you can see I'm doing here. It does take some practice, and usually once I get it nice and tightly folded, I try to flip it over and let it sit for a second. I feel like then it kind of holds its shape a little bit better. I've got a pan heating up on the stove with some nonstick spray, so I just heat up each crunch wrap for a couple minutes till it gets nice and toasty and the cheese gets melted inside. Moving on, we've got another potato breakfast bowl. I start with a regular russet potato that I'm just dicing into cubes. You can always peel it if you prefer, but I usually like to just keep the skin on. And then I pop it in a bowl like this so I can heat it in the microwave for usually 4 to 5 minutes. And while that's cooking in the microwave, I'm just getting the vegetables ready. So this is one of my favorite vegetable combinations. I've got some green bell peppers with some chopped up red onion. And then I didn't have any fresh mushrooms, so I actually just used canned mushroom for this that I strained. But just in a pan on the stove, I added these vegetables together and I cooked them for a little bit. I also added some pepper and garlic salt to them. Once the potatoes were done cooking in the microwave, I added them to the air fryer tray. So I just lined it with foil to make it a little bit cleaner, and then I'm topping it with some seasoning and some nonstick olive oil spray. Microwaving them before you air fry them really helps to let the inside get a little bit softer and then the outside gets even crispier when you heat it up in the air fryer. So I just take it out once they're done cooking and divide them into 2 portions. I'm also making Adam a bowl. And right when the potatoes were done cooking, so were the vegetables that I was making. So I just add those as well as a spicy jalapeno chicken sausage that I got from Trader Joe's. I also add 1 point of shredded reduced fat cheese to each bowl. And then I made us each 2 fried eggs, which are 0 points. This really does come together so quick and easy because while the potatoes are cooking, I get everything else like the eggs and vegetables done, and then I can just assemble it like this. Usually I'll top it with a little bit of hot sauce or maybe some ketchup, but it is a nice filling portion, and it's only 4 points, 3 for the chicken sausage and 1 for the cheese that I used. Okay, here is another variation of some eggs and toast, and this is just what I do when I don't have any veggie mix ready or anything in the fridge ready. I'm just chopping up some sweet peppers. I also found a small chunk of onion that I had already pre-cut in the fridge, so I was able to dice that up into smaller pieces, and then I just start to cook it in a pan on the stove, usually just at a low to medium heat. I add a little extra nonstick cooking spray, and then I crack 3 eggs in. I usually turn up the heat to high whenever I make scrambled eggs. I just find they cook best that way, but I continue stirring it until they're nice and scrambled and cooked, and then I'm adding some center cut bacon, which really is my favorite protein to add to eggs. My favorite cheese to add to eggs is always some cheddar, so I did 2 points of that today. That's what I was craving. I just mixed it until it was melted, and then I have some toast heating up in the air fryer that I just sprayed with some nonstick butter spray, again to just give it that flavor without adding some points. So for the 2 slices of toast, it's 3 points, and then I used 2 points of bacon and 2 points of cheese. This next breakfast is always one of my favorite sweet breakfasts to have. It is cinnamon apple pancakes, and sometimes I'll use the buttermilk protein pancake mix to make some regular pancakes, but today I'm doing my banana peanut butter recipe. You can use whatever type of apple you'd like. I'm using Honeycrisp today, and I like to just leave the peel on, but you could also peel it as well. For this today, I'm using Swerve brown sugar substitute, although lately I really do prefer the coconut brown sugar, even though it does add a couple more points. But I add some of this honey maple syrup and some buttery cinnamon roll topper with some cinnamon, and I just whisk that together until it's combined with a splash of water, which is what I add to the apples that are cooking on the stove. I like to get the apples done first so that they have a little bit of time to simmer and soften up. So I got those started, and then I start working on the pancakes. And these are the pancakes I shared earlier. So like I mentioned, I like to just make each portion in its own bowl. It's just easier to measure out the servings that way. So in each bowl, I've mashed up a banana. I add an egg, 2 tablespoons of any type of milk. Today I'm using almond milk. I add some cinnamon, baking powder, some all-purpose flour, powdered peanut butter, and then I did add a little extra of that buttery cinnamon roll topper to it. I just mix it together until it forms a pancake batter. Then I've just got a pan heating up on the stove. I make the pancakes like normal, and usually I get 3 from each portion like this. And then the apples are done as well, so I just top them each with a good portion. It's 1 point for the serving of cinnamon apples, 3 for the pancakes, and then it's not shown here, but I added some chicken sausage as well, which was 3 points on WeightWatchers. This next recipe is an air fryer recipe, although it would work in the microwave. I start with some diced Simply potatoes, which are actually now 0 points on WeightWatchers. I mix those together with 2 eggs and some veggie mix. I also mixed in 1 point of reduced fat shredded cheddar cheese, and then I chopped up some center cut bacon. I've got these ramekins that I sprayed with some nonstick olive oil spray, and now I'm just starting the second scramble. I have a different air fryer now than I did when I made these, so the setting for how I cook it is different, but usually I just cook it in like 7-minute intervals and I check it, kind of mix it around if it looks really liquidy in the middle still, but usually it bakes pretty even, and once it's firm to the touch and the egg is cooked, then usually it's done. I added a side of pineapple for 0 points, and actually this comes out to 3 points for the bake. It's only 1 for the cheese and 2 for the bacon. The potatoes are now 0 points. And this is another one that it's really easy to mix up the vegetables or the protein that you use, and a lot of the time I like to top it with some hot sauce, salt, and pepper. Next up, we've got another variation of breakfast tacos. So again, I'm using some corn tortillas that I just heat up in a pan, spray it with some nonstick spray, and flip them over after 30 seconds each side. For the filling of these tacos today, I'm scrambling up some eggs. I also wanted to have some grapes on the side, so while this is cooking up, I'm just getting my grapes ready. This is, again, nice and easy to make, especially when I've got some ingredients ready. So I pretty much just have to make the eggs and heat up the tortillas because I already had some center cut bacon cooked and prepped, as well as some leftover sauteed onion and pepper mix, which was so perfect for these tacos. I don't need much cheese on each of them to add some flavor, so I just divide up a 1-point serving on the 3 tortillas. I divide up the eggs, 2 slices of center cut bacon, and the pepper and onion mix, as well as a good amount of hot sauce. It's also nice to have the side of grapes because every time I finish my breakfast, I want something sweet, so a lot of the times that's what I use fruit for, but this meal comes out to 7 points total on WeightWatchers. Now I am making some chocolate coconut baked oats. So again, I just use my blender to combine all the ingredients, which I have a banana, I've got 2 eggs, a half a cup of milk of your choice, some vanilla, a cup of old-fashioned oats. Then today I'm adding a scoop of this chocolate protein powder. I don't use the Bloom brand anymore, but I do have some other options like PE Science that work well. I add in a teaspoon of baking powder and then 2 tablespoons of monk fruit sweetener, and I just combine that until it's fully blended. I've got my 2 ramekins again that I use for all of these baking recipes. I just got these from Target and I can link them in the description, but I evenly divide out the batter into each one. I also added some shredded coconut to this today, so it is 2 points for this serving, but it really did add a good sweetness and flavor to this. I popped them in the oven at 400 for about 25 to 30 minutes. For me, I usually test that it's done by pressing on the middle like this, and once it's pretty firm, that's how I like it. Like I mentioned before, sometimes Adam likes his a little more runny, but I prefer mine to be more cake-like all the way through. So I bake them usually the full time, about 30 minutes, and that is it. The protein powder that I used today was 1 point for the serving. The newer one I use now is 2 points, so it's either 3 to 4 points whenever I make this, but it's a nice filling serving of baked oats. Moving on, I am now making an open-faced breakfast sandwich, but before I do that, I'm making a protein shake that I'm going to sip on while I make the eggs and everything. For the protein shake, I used 3/4 cup of fat-free milk, a scoop of protein powder, a banana, and some ice cubes, and I just blend that together until it's combined. Then for the sandwich, I'm scrambling up some eggs, but before that, I chop up some onion. I sprayed a pan with some nonstick spray and added the onion with some spinach, and then I also chopped up some Canadian bacon to add to that today. I spray it with a little extra nonstick spray before I add the eggs in, and then I just scramble them together with the meat and veggies. In the air fryer, I've got some Trader Joe's ancient grain and seed bread toasting up. I'm just using 2 slices for 3 points today, and it toasts up while I get these eggs cooked. I also added some seasoning and some pepper to them. Once the toast is done, I take a Laughing Cow wedge and I just split it in half and then spread it onto each piece. The Laughing Cow helps it to give a nice creamy cheesiness, but with only adding 1 point to the meal. So once the eggs are done, I just add them on top of the toast, and then usually I'll drizzle it with some hot sauce, but this is how I make the open-faced sandwich. Sometimes I'll even eat it with a fork because it's pretty messy, but 5 points total. This last recipe is a variation of the egg scramble that I eat so often, but this time I'm using these diced potatoes, and actually this one has some seasoning already added to it. So in a pan on the stove, I spray it with some nonstick spray and just get the potatoes cooking for a little bit. This brand of chicken sausages is a little bit harder to find. It's Belinsky, but they're only 1 point for the link of the pepper option that they have. So I love using these for breakfast because they add a good amount of protein. And again, they're only 1 point. I went ahead and chopped one up as well as some mushrooms, which I just added the mushrooms to the potatoes that have been cooking for about 10 minutes. Then to the potatoes, I also add a good amount of spinach. I just rip it up into a little bit of smaller pieces with my hands, but I let that cook for a few minutes until I add the diced up chicken sausage. I add some onion and herb seasoning mix, which is so good with these eggs. I mix in 2 eggs. Today I didn't want as big of a serving. Like I've mentioned, I switch off between 2 or 3 eggs, but I cracked in 2, mix them to combine with the potatoes, and they do pretty much the same thing as they do with the shredded potatoes, where it all just mixes together and then cooks. And then I add 1 point of light mozzarella cheese. All I have to track for the egg scramble is the point of cheese and then the point for the chicken sausage. I also tracked a Quest salted caramel protein shake because I had a coffee, and then this was back when potatoes were points and now they are 0. So that is the last breakfast recipe.